Alexander read a pilot that I wrote about 4 years ago that was set in a prep school in 1980. And he kind of called me up out of the blue, and having read it, was like, I love this pilot. And I was like incredibly flattered because he's like a personal hero of mine. He's a brilliant director, so I was like blown away. And then he said, you know, but I don't really do TV, but I have this feature I want to do that's set in that world in 1970. I said, okay, sure. And I said, what is he? He said, well, basically, I really want to do this sort of optically challenged, kind of odoriferous professor that gets stuck at a prep school over Christmas break 1970 to 71 with a group of students, one of whom has sort of been stranded by his family, most definitely, and this relationship kind of evolves over the course of the movie. And so that was sort of the genesis of the whole thing. He's a brilliant, brilliant director. And I kind of feel like I went to film school on Alexander's back, in that, like, you know, he would make these references. He'd want something kind of tonally or visually, or he'd, you know, kind of want a narrative moment that, as opposed to try to unpack it verbally, he'd just be like, John Garfield, you know, all right. Michael Curtiz, point of no return, 1950, midpoint forward, click. Like, what? Hello? I'd be like, and I'd have to figure out, oh, okay, he wants sort of tonally this kind of thing, you know. He wants to be able to evoke certain moods, and I think for him, it's got to be the organic evolution of the characters over the course of the narrative. And so I think the reason he doesn't get specific in terms of distinct turns he wants is because he wants me to find it and then for him to reflect upon it. I mean, that's been our working relationship, and I hope to God it continues for many, many decades to come, because I would kill to work with him again. I think he's a brilliant guy. The story of the Holdovers is this. A optically challenged, kind of odoriferous professor, the least popular member of the faculty, right, gets stuck, actually he's being punished, gets stuck holding over at Barton Academy over Christmas because he failed a rather high-octane, high-profile student whose dad had just endowed the gym. And so as punishment and as penance, he is stuck holding over with the kids who can't go home. And they're kind of a motley crew of kids who can't return for various reasons, one of whom is Angus Tully, who gets held over at the last minute. This kid's amazing. I mean, you know, I've never seen an actor, I think he's only done, plays in high school. He's done a lot of stuff because he's a massively gifted kid. But I've never seen an actor who is more naturally available, you know, and in the moment and present. Like, you know, he's allowing us to see a lot of stuff that most people spend a lifetime hiding, you know. He's letting you see the vulnerability, he's letting you see some of the anger, he's letting you see some of the disconnects, you know. We're so blessed. I mean, Alexander can cast. I mean, he top to bottom. The actors on this show are amazing. I love my Holdovers. I love all those kids. Those kids are all amazing, you know, and funny and genuine and real. I mean, I think reality is sort of one of the hallmarks of an Alexander Payne movie. You know, it just feels real. And it's heightened, and he takes you on a journey, and there's a fun narrative. I mean, you have a good time, and I think that's one of his imperatives. Like, he wants people to be entertained, but he wants people to be entertained by the human comedy, by the reality of it, by, you know, by the landscape of people's souls. Like, he wants you to take that journey, you know, and that's kind of what we do in this movie, I think. It's so much fun to watch because they have their own sort of dry rhythm, and it kind of mirrors the thing that evolves on screen, which is the characters are these two people who are so, their lives are fraught for different reasons, you know, and their histories are weighted with different problems and tragedies, you know. And I think together they're able to share some of that pain and transcendent laugh about it. And it's remarkable to watch it evolve on screen, these two very different people who find common ground, but also give each other no quarter, which is the best part. They have this telepathic relationship that is sort of like, if sometimes there's explicit communication, but oftentimes it's almost monosyllabic because they know each other so well. They'll be like, cut, you know, just more, a little of that, yeah. And you could maybe yes, and then not no, but more of the other thing, precisely. And it's sort of like, it's like that, you know? And then you just kind of watch it and he adjusts, you know? And Alexander occasionally will just sort of make a statement about kind of what's happening this represents X, and you just see Paul's face cycle through like 4 or 5 different emotions. I feel like the one thing that is at the center, sort of the core theme of the movie, for me at least, is heroism, like quiet heroism, you know? Because the foundation of the relationship between Angus and Paul kind of goes back to my Uncle Earl and myself. And we used to call him Hero when I was growing up, because he's a guy who just like would show up and do the thing, just be present, you know, with me, and just sort of like give me this wisdom and give me this sort of tough love and give me this sort of like hard-bitten, world-weary genius that would just kind of fall out of him, that was like profane and lyrical and honest and like genuine and epic at the same time, you know? And I feel like that's what I wanted to install in the Paul character, and I think I hope it comes out. I think it does, and I think Paul Giamatti does a brilliant job doing it. Just like, you know, the heroism of Mary, I think, is really consequential, you know, in the sacrifice that she made and sort of the lurking anger that she must feel. I mean, the massive yawning injustice that has been perpetrated on her and her son, you know, and still she finds the compassion to reach out to Angus when he needs her, you know. I think this is an important story to tell now because in some respects all bets are off. I think that my generation grew up understanding, or at least believing, that there were certain mile markers that you had to hit, and if you hit those mile markers, your life would go a certain way, and that society would go a certain way, and that you could trust in democracy, and that you could trust in integrity, and you could trust in all these things, that these institutions would never fail, that they would never falter, that they would always be here for us, you know? And that's been profoundly challenged, and things have been destabilized, you know? And I feel like the idea that someone can step up and make a difference in a kid's life like Paul does for Angus, you know, and basically, in some respects, burn down everything he ever thought, you know, he would, everything he ever wanted, his entire life is predicated on the idea that he's a Barton man, you know. And he says in the film, he's like, you know, Barton means everything to me. It's my life. And yet he sacrifices that life at Barton for this kid, just to give this kid a second shot, you know. And it's that sort of altruism, that sort of integrity, that sort of maturity, that sort of courage to sacrifice that I think we need to talk about and we need to see, you know what I'm saying, right now. Here is a man who is willing to step up, and he's going to make mistakes, and he's profane, and he's an alcoholic, and he's got his problems, but he is going to basically outshine his contemporaries, outshine his colleagues, be, you know, a teacher in the best and most profound possible sense of the word, you know, at the end of the day. That's who he is. That's who he demonstrates himself to be. And the lesson that he gives is one that like will last Angus a lifetime.